Okay, so let's get started. Thanks so much for joining me today for a webinar from eBridge Marketing Solutions. And today's topic is marketing tactics for MSPs. And this is actually a webinar that originated from a blog entry that I wrote for eBridge. And it is among our most shared blog entries that we've ever written. It has gotten quite a bit of attention on social media and has been shared organically quite a bit, more so than most of the blogs that we've done. And for that reason, it made me realize that this is a topic that kind of resonated with MSPs and other IT service providers. So I decided to turn it into a webinar as well, and I hope that you enjoyed today's presentation. And before we really get into it too much further, I just wanted to take a little bit of an opportunity to tell you about eBridge Marketing Solutions. Sorry, I'm just having trouble. There we go. eBridge Marketing Solutions. So we are a marketing agency. We're a boutique agency for MSPs, vendors, and other types of IT service firms located in beautiful British Columbia, Canada, in Vancouver. We were established in 2001. And we offer a full range of marketing services. And that's my lovely mugshot there. And I'm the VP of Operations for eBridge. And if you're curious about more information about our services, I would encourage you to check out our website, which is www.ebridgemarketingsolutions.com. So, as I mentioned, this is one blog that has been shared a fair amount on social media, and it really corresponds to the sorts of questions that I quite often see posed on social media, and in particular on the subreddit for MSP subreddit there. And these are actual threads that I pulled that were fairly recent to do with marketing related questions. So I just wanted you to see the sort of questions that frequently get posed on social media. Leads, how are you getting them? Marketing, what works without breaking the bank? How do you all grow your customer base? What would you recommend to a new MSP or even an old MSP? And, these are all really good questions. And, I think they're fair questions. But what struck me was they are difficult questions to answer, especially in broad strokes. If we're talking about MSPs in terms of the entire industry, I would venture to say that some of these questions are almost impossible to answer, because if you are a large MSP serving larger organizations yourself, your method for lead generation is going to be a lot different than if you're a smaller MSP just starting out. So really, today's presentation and the blog that today's presentation was based off of was aiming to try to answer these questions and to provide a little bit of context for different MSPs at different stages of growth. So regardless of how big your MSP was, I'm hoping today, or how big your MSP is rather, I'm hoping today's presentation will give you a little bit of insight into answers to these questions. So in order to come up with a little bit of a model for today's presentation, I've piggybacked on a model that Ingram Micro has put out called their Cloud Awesomeness Roadmap. And the big thing here is, Ingram has done a good job of showing that in the small stage for MSPs, what they call the build stage, that's where you find about 60% of MSPs. So these are small MSPs with relatively few offerings. And then as you grow, the next stage, according to Ingram, is the breadth stage, which is about 30% of partners. There's more cloud offerings, and we'll touch on this a little bit more. And then you grow into the depth stage, which is about 9%. And then finally graduate into the scale stage, which is 1% of MSPs. So we're going to be using this framework today, and really it's the kind of the proportions of MSPs in each group that is kind of the important thing to draw from this slide, and just to recognize that the majority are in that first build stage. So the build stage, what is it characterized by? In the build stage, MSPs tend to have few staff and services, and the founders are wearing many hats. Quite often, the founders are coming from a technical background, so the organizational strengths do skew technical. The founders might be taking on some marketing responsibilities and maybe some sales responsibilities that they are not super familiar with and maybe not as comfortable with compared to their technical responsibilities. Quite often, MSPs at this stage of growth are still relying a lot on break-fix services and project work. Quite often, those projects are for local small businesses. And as a result, the pricing is a little bit low compared to MSPs that are a little bit more graduated. Typically, these smaller MSPs don't have dedicated marketing people. It is the founder quite often doing the marketing. And quite often they're relying on a relatively simple website and simple sales materials as well. So when I look at MSPs at this stage of growth and think about what to prioritize in terms of marketing, really to me, the biggest thing is to improve the effectiveness of the personal networking of the founders without spending a lot of money. These are smaller MSPs that don't have huge marketing budgets. And frankly, there are a lot of activities that these MSPs can be conducting themselves without having to spend a ton of money. So these sorts of things, a big one is just attending local business events. I mean, this ties into the whole idea of founders networking, in particular, your local Chamber of Commerce events. I've also heard people having mixed reviews in terms of success with BNI groups. So those sorts of things are the bread and butter that you want to be looking for to network with your local business community. And as previously mentioned, a basic website. We're not needing anything that's super fancy here. It doesn't need to be beautiful. It doesn't need to be, really in depth, but a basic website describing who you are, your basic services, and just giving people a feel for you is really important. Business cards and a company brochure. So some basic sales collateral, in other words. So when you're going to do in-person meetings, that you can leave people with some stuff to, so they can learn about your services and get in contact with you. Also having founders LinkedIn accounts set up. Again, this is just to enhance personal networking, except for on an online environment. This would be particularly important over our pandemic here. Local business listings. Similarly to local business groups, just getting your name out there into local business listings will help you get some local clients. It also has a small SEO benefit too. Doesn't typically cost a lot or anything really to get into these local business listings, and you do get a backlink out of it, which will direct towards your website, which has a nice little SEO benefit there. Prepackaged marketing programs. So, there are quite a few different marketing agencies and marketing service providers that work with MSPs. I'm sure there's some familiar names that come to mind for you that are low priced and will give you the basic tools that you need to start off with marketing. So the email templates, the prefabricated case studies and white papers and those sorts of things, checklists. So these are syndicated programs. It's cookie cutter. Every MSP gets the exact same content. But having said that, when you're starting out, these sort of prepackaged marketing programs can provide quite a lot of value and give you content that would otherwise be either too time consuming or too expensive for you to create yourself. And product sheets. So similarly to a company brochure, just having some information sheets specifically for what vendors' products you're using as part of your sales collateral. Security checklist. So this is a compelling way to explain the variety of services you offer. Ransomware is so top of mind for a lot of business owners right now that coming in with a security checklist is a good way to to kind of have a compelling conversation with your leads. And also just uniforms, coming across a little bit more professional than if you were to not have some uniforms, and making your company look a little bit bigger than it is. That will make you look more credible when you are doing that networking amongst your own personal network. So the next stage being the bread stage. What does the bread stage, what is it characterized by? And again, about 30% of MSPs are in this stage, so keep that in mind. MSPs at this stage of growth, they have a service catalog and staff that has grown beyond, just a few numbers there. We're starting to get a broader range of staff and services. Typically at this stage, there might be a marketing person, maybe 2 marketing people that have designated marketing roles. These MSPs are doing less break-fix work, trying to do more managed services. They're offering more cloud services, and they're charging more in terms of per user prices. And more customers are going to get acquired through digital marketing, like less through founders existing, network and founders networking themselves, and more through like digital outreach with marketing. And coupled with that is going to be typically a little bit more in the way of cross-selling and intelligently upselling existing customers and trying to get them to adopt new products and services as you bring them on as well. So the focus for marketing tactics at this stage of growth is really to go from the first stage, which was about founders networking, kind of one-to-one communications, and graduating to marketing tactics that will enable one-to-many communications. And so what does that look like? Well, we would recommend marketing tactics such as attending trade shows and conferences. Obviously, this has been a little bit more difficult over the last couple of years, but you can also do the virtual equivalent. Basic SEO. So, make sure that you have all the T's crossed and the I's dotted on your website in terms of the on-site SEO, that you don't have any sort of hindrances that would prevent Google or other search engines from picking up content on your website. You want to have the basics in place on your website in that regard. You also probably want to have a little bit in the way of branded promotional items. These are things that you could, use at events or conferences to, give a bunch of people something to remember you by. A car wrap, this is one where especially if you have an office that's in like a prominent part of town where there's a lot of foot traffic or just traffic in general, parking your car at the office with a car wrap is kind of the equivalent of having a billboard, except it can be less expensive and better value. It also makes you come across more professionally as well. Having a basic CRM system to keep track of customers and communications and lead statuses. That's important when you're starting to do one-to-many communications, because suddenly you can't remember all those details like you used to be able to. So recording them in a CRM system is particularly important. An email marketing tool, so and email templates too. So in a similar vein, where perhaps before just doing email marketing manually was sufficient because the numbers were smaller, to get a little bit more scale, utilizing a tool is going to be the way to go, utilizing some email templates as well. Hosting local informal events. So again, this has been a little bit difficult over the pandemic, depending on where you live, but lunch and learns, meetups at the pub, those sorts of events are great ways to get in front of decision makers that are local in your community, and also to build rapport with them in a way that online events or online tactics don't quite accomplish. So that's a nice way to build rapport with a bunch of people at once. We'd also recommend light blogging. This is helpful because it also gives you some fodder for your social media. You can typically take your blog and post it on social media afterwards and get a few more eyeballs on it. Local business event sponsorships, so similar to hosting your own events, you can sponsor other events. Maybe they're tech related or related to your particular vertical that you serve. Marketing analytics, so typically when MSPs are starting out, they don't really care too much about their analytics for their website, but it's an important thing to consider when you start to grow, because the cost of mistakes starts to get bigger as you scale more. So you want to be able to see what's working, what's not, and really to optimize based on the analytics. Having a customer newsletter doesn't need to be super fancy, but letting people know about recent happenings for your company, maybe it's quarterly or something like that, new products that you're offering, that's helpful to for cross-selling efforts and just to build that rapport as well. Organic social media, again, it doesn't need to be super fancy, but having a presence on, Twitter and LinkedIn and Facebook, those sorts of platforms can show that you're an ongoing concern, can make you look like you're a bigger company than you are, and it will get eyeballs on your brand as well. It's not a huge emphasis at this stage of growth, but just, doing a little bit, it makes sense, and especially to enhance your blog writing efforts. Press releases to announce any sort of, big news, maybe it's a new product you're launching. It could be a new key high, or it could be an acquisition. There's tons of things that you can announce in a press release. That would be a good option as well. And it tends to be pretty low cost, and it's another good way to get backlinks for SEO. And sales decks. So, whereas in the first stage, this might have been a bit too formalized. At this stage of growth, it might make sense to have sales decks to consult when you're going to do meetings with leads. All right, that brings us to our third stage, which is the depth stage here, which was 9% of MSPs according to Ingram Micro. So you might be in the depth stage if this sounds like you, where the primary objective for your MSP is to grow top line revenue. You're offering a hybrid service catalog, with mostly cloud, but maybe still some on-prem stuff as well there. Number of employees has grown to dozens, and almost assuredly with a dedicated marketing team. So we're getting a little bit more sophisticated there. New customers aren't just local anymore. They are being acquired regionally. And because they're targeting a wider area, it's typical to start utilizing a little bit in the way of basic marketing automation. An MSP at this stage of growth might have a tool like HubSpot they're using to facilitate that marketing automation and to get their emails and ultimately their lead generation assets out and distributed to the relevant audience. MSPs at this stage of growth are typically starting off with account-based marketing thinking and beginning of their inbound marketing efforts. And I put italics around thinking because, truth be told, ABM is kind of a buzzword bingo sort of term that you might hear in your own marketing meetings on occasion. And it gets used in a bunch of different contexts. ABM can be like a complete suite of tools that goes after particular accounts, so particular companies, or it can kind of be a perspective about going about that, where maybe you identify which key accounts you want to go after and cater some marketing tactics around that. But you're not like purchasing a tool to do that for you. You're kind of just planning to do that on your own. So that's what I was trying to draw the distinction of here, is that, these are larger MSPs. We're getting a little bit bigger. So it does make sense to target specific accounts, but probably not with like an ABM tool that would be quite costly. So the depth stage to me is all about getting marketing tactics to sell more stuff to more people and using marketing tactics to utilize getting marketing tactics that utilize automation to achieve the needed scale. So what does that look like? Case studies is a great one. If we're doing marketing automation and distributing sales collateral automatically through a tool like HubSpot, case studies are great because they really demonstrate specifically what you do for clients and who the type of clients you are that you work with. So that's a great way to get that information across. And a bunch of case studies, by the way, is good. Like more the merrier. If you serve multiple industries, have at least one case study per industry, and utilize that intelligently in terms of your marketing automation too, and distribute the ones about medical to people who are in the medical field, and the ones about engineering to people who are in the engineering field, and so on. At this stage too, before we had a fairly basic website, but given that we have more sophistication in marketing at this stage, and we're relying a little bit more on automation as well, we can start looking at conversion optimization. And also we have analytics too, which enable our conversion optimization. So this is really about going through the website and looking at the flow for users through your website and through your entire sales process, to be honest, but it does tend to focus more on the website. And looking for potential bottlenecks where people might not be advancing essentially down the funnel, and trying to solve those things. So, a typical example might be, let's say you're blogging and some of your blog topics are attracting traffic that isn't really likely to become customers. So maybe it's a blog about keeping WordPress websites up to date, for instance. This is a general topic. It would tend to attract people from around the world, let's say, and generally people who might not be super interested in actually becoming a customer. So when you have low quality traffic going to your blog, one conversion optimization thing you can do is to try to add more aggressive call to actions. A call to action, normally you might not want it to be super aggressive because it might come across as annoying. But if that traffic that you're attracting already isn't converting, then you can optimize for conversions by having a more aggressive call to action. The risk of annoying that traffic is lesser. So that's just an example, but it's, it's thinking about who's arriving at your website, how are they advancing through the website, where are you losing them, and then what sort of tactics can you apply to the website to mitigate losing them at that point. Similarly to case studies, ebooks is a great way to get the word out about exactly what your services are in a little bit more depth. Tends to be a little bit more of a thought leadership piece than a case study would be, so they're a little bit longer, and that's a great way to get credibility too, just because it takes a little bit more work to put together an ebook than some other sorts of marketing tactics, and it shows that you're serious. Direct mail. So this is another one that has taken a little bit of a back seat during coronavirus, just because people have been working remotely. And there's not much point in sending direct mail to offices if people aren't in the offices. So depending where you are in the world and the extent to which you've gone back to work in your community, direct mail might be an option. The one downside of direct mail is it is environmentally unfriendly too. And so these days we need to think more and more about that. But it still does have its niche applications. And perhaps if you are hosting something like local events, direct mail is a good way to invite people to those events too. Enhanced SEO. So in the past, where we were thinking about just basic SEO, which was mostly on fixing on-site errors and light blogging and things like that. Now we can look at enhanced SEO, which is really about building out content in a strategic manner, figuring out, okay, what are my competitors ranking for that I'm not? And does that mean I need to add additional sections to my website? Do I have enough backlinks to enable my website content to rank effectively? Are there any advanced technical issues I might be running into? Those are the sorts of things you look at with advanced SEO at this stage, and it's worthwhile. Explainer videos. YouTube is the second biggest search engine in the world, and explainer videos are a good avenue to go about adding some content to YouTube. So that's a good way to go. We practice what we preach in this regard. How-to guides. So more thought leadership content, similar benefits for that as for case studies and for ebooks. Inbound marketing. So previously when we're just starting out with inbound marketing, now we're gonna dig our heels in and really formalize our HubSpot strategy and think about how we want to be nurturing leads along with our inbound marketing. And also getting people to the website with quality SEO is a big component. So, inbound's all about getting people to the website with SEO, capturing their contact information, and then nurturing them with email marketing. That's the basic idea. Infographics are another great way to get thought leadership pieces out there. Nice visual. It's also good fodder for social media. Landing pages for any sort of ad campaigns we might be doing. Smaller MSPs tend to send any sort of new visitors to the home page versus landing pages. But if you want to up the sophistication and trying to sell more stuff here, you can have landing pages that are customized to different campaigns, maybe focusing on different products or services and different target audiences as well. A live sales chat tool. So this is one that we don't recommend for smaller MSPs because you do have to monitor it. And there are some downsides to using a live sales chat tool for MSPs in that people will try to submit like ticket requests through these. But having said that, it can be a good sales tool as well. So, if you have a dedicated marketing department and might be able to spare somebody to monitor this throughout the day and to, direct people back to the support ticket system when needed, this could be a good option for you. A marketing automation tool like HubSpot, which we already touched on. Paid social media is worth considering at this stage too. So in the past, when we're just doing organic, now you might want to consider some campaigns to generate leads on LinkedIn and Facebook in particular. Pay-per-click advertising, so typically through Google. At the very least, I would recommend having branded campaigns. So when someone searches for your brand name, your ads are showing up and not your competitors. But it would be worth taking a look at some campaigns based around services as well. More regular blogging to coincide with the enhanced SEO efforts is important at this stage too. Google loves seeing content. Remarketing. So this is getting people who visit your website or people who you've collected their contact information from and reaching out to them again, either via email marketing or with ads. So, there's a cliche in marketing that it takes 7 touch points for a customer, 7 touch points for your brand for a customer to complete a purchase. It's even more for B2B. I don't know the exact number. It's a rule of thumb anyway, but the basic idea behind remarketing is it allows you to get more of those touch points to encourage people to ultimately make the purchase. Speaking engagements. So this is, again, a thought leadership activity. Would encourage you to record them and put them up on YouTube as well to get that synergy. Social media automation. So, again, achieving scale that way, using a tool like Hootsuite rather, to enhance your social media efforts across multiple channels. Teleprospecting. So this is, cold calling essentially. Cold calling plays a role for smaller MSPs as well. But at this stage, you might want to consider even hiring a third party to do it. To reach out beyond your network and beyond your existing leads and your existing community to get some new leads coming in that way. And trade show exhibits. So, this is similar to the conferences and the speaking engagements, getting yourself out there, exhibiting, giving people some swag and achieving some synergy that way, and also collecting some business cards. So that's obviously a great way to collect leads there. And finally, the 2 more thought leadership pieces here, webinars and white papers. And again, we're practicing what we preach here today with the webinars, and we'll be putting this up on YouTube, and I would suggest you do the same. And white papers in a similar vein to the case studies and ebooks. This is a good way to get yourself out there in terms of thought leadership and to leave people with some sales collateral. So finally, we come to the scale stage, the 4th stage that only 1% of MSPs ever achieve, the kind of mythical stage that, is for most MSPs is to be viewed as a goal, but, we'll never actually get there. And this, from a marketing perspective, is when, we can start having a little bit more sophisticated campaigns, because we're having a full range of services at this point. Both cloud and otherwise. There's dozens of employees typically. There's a full-fledged marketing department. At this point, we have formalized ABM processes in terms of account-based marketing. The customer base is skewing larger. So as the MSP tends to grow, so do their clients. And because we're going after larger organizations at this point, the geographical range that they're going after tends to be wider as well. So we can encapsulate more of those larger organizations. And branding becomes particularly important this stage as well, because, up until now, MSPs, it's not really a big deal about branding. It's just not a huge focus compared to some of the other tactics. And also brand awareness tends to be a little more costly in terms comparatively to other tactics. But you do see larger MSPs do things like, at sporting events, they'll advertise, or, television ads and things like that to try to raise awareness amongst the larger organizations that they're going after. Especially for sporting events, perhaps they're entertaining clients at the same sporting event, and tying in some advertising that way has some nice cohesion. So these are larger MSPs with sophisticated sales and marketing. So the focus for tactics for MSPs at this stage of growth, in my opinion, it's really about showcasing what's different about your MSP's brand while targeting specific people at specific organizations. So for marketing tactics, what are we recommending? While we were recommending ABM thinking, now an ABM tool might come in more into play. So a tool that formalizes the lead nurturing and the remarketing, and really the CRM, the handling of the contact information, and really brings that all together and runs the nuts and bolts of a marketing campaign to reach out to particular people at particular organizations. So tools like that are available. They tend to be costly, so it doesn't make sense for smaller MSPs, but at this stage it would. Advertorial content. So, this is a way for companies to get SEO juice and to get backlinks, but it tends to be quite costly. So, you could go and get an article written for you in a major magazine or in a major website. And that will have some SEO benefit, and if it's a website, and it will have some thought leadership benefit as well. But it tends to be quite costly. So again, not going to be appropriate for smaller MSPs. I mean, for like just off the top of my head here, you're probably thinking about maybe $5,000 or $10,000 per content piece if we're talking about a large publication. So that adds up quite quickly if it's just one component of your campaign. Billboard ads, that's there's a few different things I'd put into the category of traditional media, like billboard, radio, and TV. Those are going to come more into play here. They tend to be more expensive. They tend to be harder to measure, but they also do get a lot of eyeballs on your brand. Promoting charitable endeavors, making that a main thrust of your marketing. Again, there's obviously an added cost to that, which might make it harder for smaller MSPs, but it does showcase your brand and your, what you stand for. And given the MSPs tend to offer a lot of similar services, this can be a nice way to stand out and differentiate yourself. Client appreciation events, so schmoozing at golf tournaments and dinners, picking up from what we did earlier on with smaller events, but really scaling it out so they're bigger and involve more people. Content syndication campaigns. So this is a tactic where you take things like white papers in particular, but it could also be like security checklists or ebooks, and use third-party websites to distribute that, those assets. And anyone who wants to download them has to disclose their contact information, and that's how you generate leads. So this is a fairly expensive tactic. It was more common, I would say, about 5 years ago or so, less common these days, but it would still be worthwhile for larger MSPs that have the budget to support these campaigns, especially if they're doing a lot of content creation. It's a good way to utilize that content. Event sponsorships, getting your brand out there for local industry events, and perhaps doing a major sponsorship would be a good way to gain brand awareness. Guest blogging, so very similar to advertorial. You can pay for guest blogging opportunities. Industry research reports are another variety, similar vein to an ebook, except it tends to be more in depth. Typically, you would industry research reports have a little bit of a different tone as well, in that they are they're supposed to be more neutral. They can mention your brand, they can position your brand well in terms of the topic, but the focus should be about educating and providing that value, and less on sales. It would be inappropriate to be salesy in an industry report like this. And typically it would also be done by a third party. You would hire a researcher to do this for you instead of doing it in-house. And because of that, it tends to be quite expensive as well. Magazine and newspaper ads. So this is the traditional media that I was talking about previously. For smaller MSPs, this doesn't really make sense, but these are good ways to gain brand awareness if you have the budget to support them. Personalized email campaigns, picking up on the inbound marketing and the marketing automation, and ABMs as well. You can customize email campaigns to particular people or particular small groups of people. Podcast ads, again, a great way to gain awareness. And you'd be surprised how often there are local podcasts. There might even be, for your municipality, a local tech podcast. So those are good opportunities and can actually be relatively inexpensive. It depends. Obviously, there's massive podcasts too that would be very expensive to sponsor, but it's worth looking into at the very least. And in addition to advertising on other people's podcasts, some MSPs I've seen do their own podcasts. A great way again to get in front of your audience and to build a little rapport with them, to get them used to your voice and who you are. So that is, it's an interesting one because the cost to do your own podcast is very low in terms of like the dollar amount, but there is a big investment in terms of time. But a good way to be a thought leader there as well is to, get people listening to your podcast. Radio ads are very similar to podcast ads, audio ads, and, tend to be local as well, which is nice for MSPs. And the cost for these ads, I would say traditional media in general is coming down. It's not as expensive as it used to be, so presents more of an opportunity. Targeted digital advertising. So we haven't really talked about digital advertising until this point much, with the exception of remarketing. And the reason being is that it's just not super effective in this space. There's a few exceptions that we've touched on, but for the most part, targeted digital advertising, it has to be really targeted for it to make sense. The nature of digital advertising is that you can spend a lot of money very, very quickly if you want to. And if you're too broad in your approach, then you run the risk of doing so. But being very targeted in terms of going after specific audiences online that seem like they're aligned with your, whatever markets you're trying to reach, that could make sense for you. So just going back to revisit the questions that really spawned today's presentation and the blog as well. These questions from Reddit about how are you getting leads? What's working for marketing without breaking the bank? How do you grow your customer base? What would you recommend for marketing for a new MSP or an older MSP? The honest answer is it really depends. And I hope today I've left you with a little bit of information to consider in regards to where your MSP is at in your stage of growth, and the appropriate marketing tactics to support a smart strategy for you. So, whether or not you're a small MSP and you want to focus on enhancing founders' growth, or you're looking to graduate to where you're doing one-to-many communications or selling stuff to more and more people, going after large organizations in the final stage of growth. I hope I've provided a little bit of food for thought for what sort of marketing tactics you should consider. And if you have any questions, I would be happy to take them at this time. I don't see any questions coming through here. Okay, well, we'll wrap it up for today then. Again, appreciate everyone for joining. And if you're interested in more information, my contact information is on the screen there. You can reach out directly and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I would also encourage you to check out our blog. If you search marketing tactics for MSPs, it should pop up in Google there. And check that out. And it has a little bit more detail on what I discussed today. And I would also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So we should be publishing these videos about once every 3 weeks. And if you liked what you heard today and you want to hear more of it, please subscribe. All right. Thanks, everyone.